tonight in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The ceremony honored those who continue to carry on his legacy. Awards were presented to individuals who help represent Dr. King's unwavering commitment to justice, equality, and social change. Western Mass News stopped by the event and we caught up with one of the awardees, president of Westfield State University, Dr. Linda Thompson. And she tells us it's touching to see the community coming together.
I'm happy that we here in Western Mass, the city of Westfield, the city of West Springfield are coming together to bring Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream alive.
We also spoke with West Springfield Mayor Will Reichelt. He tells us it's a pleasure to honor those who've helped make a positive difference in our area.
Folks that are willing to get in there and do the work to push diversity, equity, and inclusion and make that happen in the communities they live in. So I think it's really important to have this event and to recognize the folks that are doing that work.
Tonight's event was held at Shaker Farms Country Club in Westfield. In Ludlow,